the world came back to Haiyan Wu in pieces. First the taste of blood in his mouth, then the smell of smoke and burning metal. Finally, the sharp pain shooting up his left leg like lightning. He opened his eyes and saw green, not the gentle green of earth forests, but something alien and wrong. The leaves above him were too large, too bright, and they moved in patterns that made no sense. Some hung down like curtains, while others twisted upward, like reaching hands. Haiyan Wu tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The pain in his leg exploded into white-hot fire that made him gasp. He looked down and saw the problem. A twisted piece of his scout ship had pinned his leg to the ground. The metal was bent at an impossible angle, and dark blood seeped out from under it. "Emergency beacon," he whispered to himself. His voice sounded strange in the alien forest.
Oh.
Too small. To human, he reached for his belt where the beacon should be. Gone. He patted his chest, his pockets, the ground around him. Nothing. The beacon must have been thrown clear in the crash, or maybe it was buried somewhere in the wreckage behind. Haiyan Wu twisted his neck to look back at what remained of his ship. The scout vessel had hit the ground hard and broken into 3 main pieces. The cockpit where he had been sitting was crumpled like a tin can. How he had survived it all was a miracle. The engine section was completely destroyed. Black smoke still rose from it in thin streams. Taka Bay had split open like a fruit, spilling supplies across the forest floor. He could see his medkit about 20 meters away, its white case bright against the dark soil. 20 meters might as well have been 20 kilometers. With his leg trapped, he could not move. Haiyan Wu closed his eyes and tried to remember his training. First priority was always communication. Send a distress signal. But without his beacon, that was impossible. Second priority was medical care. Stop bleeding, treat wounds, maintain body temperature. The med kit was too far away. He could not tell how bad his leg was with the metal on top of it. Third priority was shelter and water. Looked up at the alien sky through the green canopy. The sun was different here. Larger and more orange. Than Earth's sun, it was already past noon, which meant he had been unconscious for hours. Night would come, and with it, unknown dangers. The forest around him was not quiet. Strange sounds echoed through the trees. Some were like bird calls, but deeper and more musical. Others were growls and rustles that made his skin crawl. Once, something large crashed through the underbrush nearby. Shaking the ground beneath him, Haiyan Wu had studied the reports on this moon before his mission. Kithara was classified as a Class 3 world. Dangerous but not immediately lethal. Air was breathable, the water was clean, and the plant life was not toxic to humans. But the animal life was another story entirely. The reports mentioned creatures called shadowmanes, apex predators that hunted in packs. They were described as feline in appearance, but much larger than any earth cat. 3 meters tall at the shoulder, claws that could cut through steel, intelligence that bordered on the supernatural. The thought made Haiyan Wu shiver despite the warm air. He had no weapons. His sidearm was somewhere in the wreckage, and even if he could find it, what good would it do against a pack of giant alien cats? He forced himself to focus on immediate problems. The metal pinning his leg was not impossibly heavy. If he could get the right angle, he might be able to lift it enough to pull his leg free. But every time he tried to move, the pain made him dizzy. Time passed slowly. The alien sun moved across the sky, and the quality of light in the forest began to change. The green became deeper, more mysterious. Shadows lengthened and twisted into shapes that looked almost like living things. It was then that Haiyan Wu saw the eyes. They were amber-colored and huge, reflecting the fading sunlight like twin golden coins. They watched him from the shadows. Between 2 massive trees about 50 meters away, the eyes were perfectly still. But somehow Haiyan Wu knew they were studying him with intense intelligence. His heart began to race. He had found one of the shadowmanes. Rather, it had found him. Haiyan Wu tried to remain perfectly still. Maybe if he did not move, did not make any threatening gestures, the creature would lose interest and go away. But the eyes continued to watch him without blinking. Minutes passed. The eyes did not move, did not look away. Haiyan Wu began to wonder if he was imagining them. Perhaps his injured brain was playing tricks on him. No, they were real, and they were getting closer. The creature moved so silently that Haiyan-Wu did not see it until it was only 30 meters away. It was even larger than the reports had described. Its body was built like a massive cat, but its proportions were alien. The legs were too long, the head too large, the tail too thick. Its fur was a dark color that seemed to shift and change as it moved, blending with the shadows around it. But it was the intelligence in those amber eyes that truly frightened Haiyan-Wu. This was not just an animal. This was a thinking being, and it was deciding what to do with him. The shadow mane moved closer. 20 meters, 15, 10. Its massive paws made no sound on the forest floor. Every muscle in its body spoke of perfect, predatory power. If it decided to attack, Haiyan-Wu would be dead before he could blink, but the attack did not come. Instead, the creature stopped about 5 meters away and sat down, like a house cat, but a house cat the size of a small truck. It wrapped its thick tail around its front paws and continued to watch him. Haiyan-Wu stared back, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. The creature tilted its head slightly, as if curious about this strange being it had found in its forest. Gesture was so familiar, so cat-like, that Haiyan-Wu almost smiled despite his terror. "Hello?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The shadow mane's ears twitched forward at the sound. It made a low, rumbling noise deep in its chest. Not quite a growl, not quite a purr. Something in between, as the alien sun began to set, casting long shadows through the forest. Haiyan-Wu realized his situation had changed completely. He was no longer alone. Or whether that was better or worse remained to be seen. The shadow mane continued to watch him. As darkness fell over the forest of Kithara, the alien night brought sounds that made Haiyan-Wu's blood run cold. Strange clicks and whistles echoed through the trees. Something large moved through the underbrush nearby, branches snapping under its weight. In the distance, a creature made a sound like screaming metal that went on for nearly a minute. The shadow mane had not moved from its position. It sat like a living statue, those amber eyes reflecting the strange blue glow that came from some of the plants around them. Haiyan-Wu had never seen bioluminescent plants before, but he was grateful for the light. Total darkness would have been worse. His leg was getting worse. The pain had changed from sharp stabbing to a deep throbbing ache. He could feel his boot filling with blood, and the metal pressing down seemed to be cutting off circulation. His toes were going numb. "I need to get this off," he said quietly to himself. But every time he tried to shift the twisted metal, pain made him gasp, and his vision went dark around the edges. The shadow mane's ears twitched when he spoke. Was listening to him, he realized. Not just watching, but actually paying attention to the sounds he made. "You understand me, don't you?" Yuan whispered. "Maybe not the words, but you know I'm trying to communicate." The creature made that low rumbling sound again. It was definitely not a growl. There was something almost gentle about it. Hours passed. The alien moon rose overhead, casting silver light through the canopy. It was larger than Earth's moon, and had a reddish tint that made everything look strange and dreamlike. Wu's leg had stopped bleeding, but he could feel fever starting to build in his body. Infection was setting in. It was then that he heard the new sounds. Skittering, dozens of small feet moving across the forest floor. Getting closer, the shadow mane's entire body tensed. Its ears flattened against its head, and it rose to its feet in one fluid motion. The rumbling sound changed to something much deeper and more threatening. Hien was strained to see what was approaching. At first he saw nothing. Then the blue glow from the plants revealed movement in the shadows. Creatures about the size of large dogs were creeping toward him. But they were not dogs. They looked more like beetles that had learned to walk upright. Their shells gleamed in the moonlight, and he could see multiple eyes reflecting the light like tiny stars. There were at least a dozen of them, maybe more. They moved in a coordinated group, spreading out to surround him. Scavengers, Haiyan-Wu realized. They had smelled his blood and come to investigate. The shadow mane stepped forward, placing itself between Haiyan-Wu and the approaching creatures. The rumbling in its chest became a proper growl now, low and menacing. The beetle creatures stopped. Their advance but did not retreat. One of the scavengers, larger than the others, made a chittering sound and took a step forward. The Shadowmane's response was immediate and terrifying. It moved faster than Hyan-Wu's eyes could follow, covering the distance in a single leap. Its claws extended and swept through the air with a sound like tearing paper. The large scavenger was dead before it hit the ground. The Shadowmane landed gracefully and spun to face the others, its fur standing on end, making it look even larger than before. The remaining creatures hesitated, chittered among themselves, their multiple eyes fixed on their fallen packmate. The Shadowmane took a step toward them and roared. It was not like any sound Hyan-Wu had ever heard. It was deeper than thunder, more primal than any earth animal could make. The sound seemed to come from the very ground beneath them, vibrating. Through his bones, the scavengers scattered. They disappeared into the darkness so quickly that Hyan-Wu wondered if he had imagined them. Only the body of the large one remained, its dark fluid pooling around it. The Shadowmane stood still for a long moment, listening to the night sounds. When it was satisfied that the threat was gone, it returned to its original position and sat down. Again, but now it was facing outward, keeping watch over the forest around them. "You saved me," Hyan-Wu said softly. "You could have just watched them take me apart, but you didn't." The creature's ear twitched in his direction, but it did not turn around. It was still on guard, still protecting him, as the night wore on. Hyan-Wu found himself talking to his strange guardian. The fever was making him lightheaded, and the words came easily. "My name is Hyan-Wu," he said. "I'm from Earth. That's a planet very far from here. I have a sister there named Biora. She's probably worried sick about me right now." "Oh." The Shadowmane's tail swished once, as if in acknowledgement. "I was supposed to be mapping this sector for the Survey Corps. Just a routine mission. Chart the system. Check for valuable resources. Make sure there are no signs of hostile alien activity." He laughed, but it came out bitter. "I guess I found the alien activity." More time passed. The fever was getting worse, and Hyan-Wu's thoughts began to drift. He told the Shadowmane about his training on Mars, about his friend Jamin, who had wanted to come on this mission but had been assigned to a different ship. He talked about Earth's blue skies and the way rain smelled on summer evenings. The creature listened to it all without moving, occasionally making that gentle rumbling sound when Hyan-Wu paused for too long. As dawn approached, the fever peaked. Hyan-Wu's vision blurred, and he felt like he was floating. The pain in his leg faded to a distant throb. He was drifting in and out of consciousness when he felt something cool and wet against his lips. Water. Someone was giving him water. He opened his eyes and saw the Shadowmane's massive head inches from his face. The creature was holding something. In its mouth, a large leaf, folded and shaped to hold liquid. "Clean, clear water. How did you... Hyan-Wu began. But the creature gently pressed the leaf cup against his lips again. He drank gratefully, the cool water soothing his parched throat. When he had finished, the Shadowmane carefully set the leaf aside and settled down next to him, not touching but close enough that Hyan-Wu could feel the warmth radiating from its body. "Thank you," Hyan-Wu whispered. "I don't know why you're helping me, but thank you." The creature made a sound he had not heard before, softer than the rumbling, almost musical. It sounded almost like a lullaby as the alien sun rose over the forest of Cathera. Hyan-Wu fell into the first peaceful sleep he had had since the crash. The massive predator that should have been his death had become his protector, and somehow, in this strange place, so far from home, he no longer felt alone. The Shadowmane kept watch over him as he slept, those amber eyes missing nothing that moved in the morning shadows. Hyan-Wu woke to find the Shadowmane gone. Panic shot through him as he looked around the crash site. The morning sun filtered through the alien canopy, and the forest seemed peaceful. But his protector was nowhere to be seen. Had it been a fever? Dream? Had he imagined the whole thing? The dead scavenger was still there, dark stains marking where it had died. And beside him sat another leaf cup, filled with fresh water.
"Hello,"
called out weakly.
"are you still here?"
A low rumble answered. Him from somewhere in the trees. The shadow mane stepped out of the shadows, something hanging from its mouth. It was carrying what looked like a large fruit, deep purple in color. The creature approached carefully and set the fruit down next to the water. Haiyan stared at the offering. The fruit was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a melon, but its skin was smooth and seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. "Is this food?" he asked. "Is it safe for me to eat?" The shadow mane pushed the fruit closer with its nose, then sat back on its haunches. Those amber eyes watched him. Expectantly. Haiyan was desperately hungry. He had not eaten since before the crash, and his body needed fuel to fight the infection. He picked up the fruit and examined it. It had a sweet smell, like honey mixed with something floral. There were no obvious signs of danger. He took a small bite. The flesh was soft and incredibly sweet, with a texture like custard. It tasted wonderful, and more importantly, it did not make him sick. He ate slowly, watching the shadow mane for any signs of alarm. The creature seemed pleased that he was eating. "Thank you, Haiyan," we said between bites. "I don't know how you know what I can eat, but thank you." The shadow mane made that gentle rumbling sound again. It was becoming familiar now, almost comforting. After he finished eating, Haiyan tried once more to free his leg. The metal had shifted slightly during the night, and he thought he might be able to work it loose. But when he tried to lift it, the pain was overwhelming. His vision went dark, and he had to stop. The infection was getting worse. Red lines were spreading up his leg from the wound, and his skin felt hot to the touch. He was running out of time. The shadow mane seemed to sense his distress. It approached the twisted metal and sniffed at it carefully. Then it looked at Haiyan with what could only be described as concern. "I need to get this off," Haiyan explained, though he doubted the creature could understand. "But I'm not strong enough. It's too heavy." The shadow mane studied the problem for a long moment. Then it did something that amazed Haiyan. It began to dig. Using its massive claws, the creature started excavating the soil around the metal debris. It worked with surprising precision, removing dirt and rocks without disturbing the metal itself. Slowly, carefully, it was creating space. Underneath the twisted wreckage, Wu watched in fascination as the alien predator worked. This was not random behavior. This was problem-solving. The shadow mane had analyzed the situation and come up with a solution. After an hour of digging, the creature stepped back and looked at its work. It had created a shallow depression under the metal, giving Haiyan leg room to move. The shadow mane approached and very gently gripped the metal in its teeth. "Careful," Haiyan whispered. "If you move it too fast, ... The creature lifted slowly, its powerful neck muscles straining. The metal rose inch by inch, and Haiyan felt the pressure on his leg decrease. When there was enough clearance, he pulled his leg free. The damage was worse than he had feared. The bone was definitely broken, and the wound was deep and infected. But at least he was no longer trapped. The shadow mane released the metal and let it crash back to the ground. It immediately came over to examine Haiyan's leg, sniffing carefully but not touching. Its expression, if a giant alien cat could have expressions, looked worried. "I can't walk," Haiyan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need medical help, but I can't get to it." The shadow mane sat back and seemed to think. It looked at Haiyan, then at the forest around them, then back at Haiyan. It was clearly trying to figure something out. The fever was getting worse. Haiyan thoughts were becoming fuzzy, and he felt like he was drifting away from his body. He found himself talking without really meaning to. "My friend Jamin always said I was too stubborn to die," he mumbled. "We went through training together on Mars. He wanted to see the galaxy, visit alien worlds. I told him he was crazy, said we should stay on Earth where it was safe." The shadow mane's ears perked up at the sound of his voice. It moved closer, that gentle rumbling starting in its chest again. "I wish he was here," Haiyan continued. "He always knew what to do. When we got lost during survival training, he found water using nothing but a stick and his nose. When our food ran out, he caught fish with his bare hands. He would know how to get out of this." The creature made a different sound, softer and more musical. It almost sounded like sympathy. The day wore on, and Hyan-Wu's condition continued to deteriorate. The fever came in waves, sometimes leaving him lucid and sometimes making him delirious. During his clear moments, he noticed the shadow mane leaving and returning with more water and food. But during the worst of the fever, he barely knew where. It was during one of these fever dreams that he felt himself being lifted. Strong teeth gripped his jacket, and he was slowly, carefully raised off the ground. The shadow mane was incredibly gentle, adjusting its grip to avoid hurting him. When Hyan-Wu was settled on the creature's back, the shadow mane stood up. It was like riding a moving mountain. The alien predator was easily strong enough to carry him, and its gait was surprisingly smooth. "Where are we going?" Hyan-Wu asked weakly. The shadow mane did not answer, of course, but it began to move through the forest with purpose. This was not random wandering. The creature had a destination in mind. As they traveled, Hyan-Wu found himself talking again. Fever made it easy to share things he would normally keep private. "I never told anyone this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Was scared when they assigned me to this mission. I'd never been so far from home before. My sister Biora, she cried when I left. She made me promise to come back." The shadow mane's ears twitched, showing it was listening. "I don't want to die here," Hyan-Wu continued. "I don't want to be just another name on a casualty report. I want to see Earth again. I want to hug my sister and tell her I'm sorry for leaving." The creature made that comforting, rumbling sound, and somehow Hyan-Wu felt a little less alone as the alien sun began to set. Painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the shadow mane continued its journey through the forest. It moved with the determination of someone who knew exactly where they were going and why. Hyan-Wu closed his eyes and let himself be carried toward whatever destination his unlikely savior had chosen. For the first time since the crash, he felt something that might have been hope. The shadow mane traveled through the night without stopping. Hyan-Wu drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes aware of the steady rhythm of the creature's movement, sometimes lost in fever dreams about home. When dawn came, they had reached a place unlike anywhere Hyan-Wu had seen before. The forest gave way to a deep canyon system with walls of red stone that stretched up toward the sky. Strange rock formations jutted out like teeth, and the air smelled different here. Sharper, more dangerous. The shadow mane stopped at the edge of the canyon and set Hyan-Wu down gently. The creature's amber eyes scanned the rocky walls above them, and its ears flattened against its head. Something about this place made it nervous. "What is it?" Hyan-Wu asked weakly. "What's wrong?" As if in answer to his question, a shadow passed over them. Then another. Hyan-Wu looked up and saw shapes moving against the morning sky. They were large, much larger than any bird he had ever seen. Their wings were leathery and stretched wide, and they moved with the lazy confidence of apex predators. The shadow mane made a low, growling sound and nudged Hyan-Wu with its nose. It wanted him to be quiet. More shadows passed overhead. The creatures were circling now, drawn by something they had sensed. Hyan-Wu realized with growing horror that they were attracted to his body heat. His fever was making him glow like a beacon to anything that could see in the thermal spectrum. The shadow mane seemed to understand this too. It looked around frantically, then began moving toward a muddy area near a small stream that flowed along the canyon floor. With its claws, it began digging up wet clay and mud. "Oh, what are you doing?" Hyan-Wu whispered. The creature did not answer. Instead, it began applying the mud to Hyan-Wu's body with its paws. The cool clay felt good against his fevered skin. But he did not understand why the shadow mane was doing this until he remembered his thermal training. The mud would mask his heat signature. The flying predators would not be able to see him as easily. The shadow mane worked quickly, covering Hyan-Wu's arms, legs, and face with the clay. When it was finished, it applied mud to itself as well, though its natural body temperature was lower and less likely to attract attention. Above them, the flying creatures were getting closer. Hyan-Wu could hear their calls now, harsh cries that echoed off the canyon walls. They were hunting calls, he realized. The pack was communicating as they searched for prey. The shadow mane carefully lifted Hyan-Wu onto its back again and began moving along the canyon floor. It stayed close to the rock walls, using the shadows and overhangs for cover. Every few minutes it would stop and listen, waiting for the flying predators to pass. Before moving again, the journey through the canyon was a nightmare of careful movement and constant fear. Several times the flying creatures swooped low, their massive wings creating wind that stirred up dust and debris. But the mud camouflage worked. They passed over without noticing the two travelers below. Hours passed. The canyon seemed to go on forever, winding deeper into the alien landscape. The shadow mane never stopped, never rested, though Han-Wu could feel the exhaustion in its movements. The creature had been carrying him for almost a full day now, and it had not eaten or slept. "You need to rest," Han-Wu said during one of his lucid moments. "Put me down, take a break." Shadow Mane made a sound that might have been disagreement and kept walking. It was mid-afternoon, and they reached the most dangerous part of the canyon. Here the walls closed in, creating a narrow passage with no cover from above. The flying predators seemed to sense this was a choke point. They circled constantly overhead, waiting for prey to attempt the crossing. The Shadow Mane stopped and studied the situation. It was clearly trying to figure out how to get through without being seen. But there was no way to hide in the narrow passage. It would be completely exposed. That was when Han-Wu's fever broke for a moment, and his head cleared enough to think. He remembered something from his survival training, something about predator behavior. "They hunt by sight and heat," he said quietly. "But what about smell? If we could confuse their sense of smell..." The Shadow Mane's ears perked up. It seemed to understand what he was suggesting. Near the canyon wall, there was a plant that gave off a strong, pungent odor. The Shadow Mane investigated it carefully, then began rubbing against it. The smell was overwhelming, like rotting fruit mixed with chemicals. But it would mask their natural scent when they were both covered in the plant's oils. The Shadow Mane picked up Han-Wu and began the crossing. It moved faster than before, but still carefully, placing each paw silently on the rocky ground. Above them, the flying predators cried out in confusion. They could sense something was wrong, but they could not pinpoint what it was. The combination of mud masking their heat and the plant oils confusing their smell was working. They were halfway through the passage when disaster struck. A piece of loose rock shifted under the Shadow Mane's weight and tumbled down the canyon wall. The sound echoed loudly in the narrow space. The flying predators responded immediately. They dove toward the sound, their cries becoming more excited. The Shadow Mane broke into a run, racing for the far end of the passage as the aerial hunters closed in. Han-Wu held on as tightly as he could, his broken legs screaming in pain with every jarring step. Behind them, he could hear the rush of air as massive wings beat the air. The predators were gaining. The Shadow Mane reached the end of the narrow passage and immediately dove into a cave opening in the canyon wall. They tumbled inside just as the first of the flying creatures reached the spot where they had been. The cave was dark and cool. The Shadow Mane set Han-Wu down gently and collapsed beside him, its sides heaving with exhaustion. Outside, the flying predators circled and called, but they could not fit into the cave opening. "We made it," Han-Wu whispered. "We actually made it." The Shadow Mane made a tired, rumbling sound and closed its eyes. For the first time since beginning their journey, it allowed itself to rest, as they waited in the cave for the flying predators to give up and leave. Han-Wu studied his unlikely savior. The creature's fur was matted with mud and plant oils. Its paws were cut and bleeding from the rough canyon floor. It had pushed itself to the point of collapse to keep him safe. "Why?" Han-Wu asked quietly. "Why are you doing this for me?" "I'm nothing to you. Just some alien who fell out of the sky." The Shadow Mane opened one amber eye and looked at him. Then it did something that surprised Han-Wu completely. It began to groom his hair with its rough tongue, the way a cat would groom another cat. It was a gesture of affection, family. The Shadow Mane had adopted him into its pack. Even though he was the only member, Han-Wu felt tears running down his muddy cheeks. He reached out with a shaking hand and touched the creature's massive head. The Shadow Mane rumbled contentedly and continued its grooming outside. The flying predators finally gave up their search and moved on. The canyon became quiet again. But inside the cave, two unlikely friends rested together, bonded by shared danger and mutual care. The journey was far from over, but they had survived their first great test together. They rested in the cave for several hours while the shadow mane recovered its strength. Haiyan-Wu's fever had broken, and for the first time since the crash, his mind was clear. He could think properly again, and what he saw worried him. The shadow mane was exhausted beyond measure. Its breathing was labored, and its eyes were sunken with fatigue. The creature had been carrying him for 2 days without proper rest or food. It was killing itself to save him. "Can't keep this up," Haiyan-Wu said gently. "You're going to collapse." The shadow mane lifted its head and looked at him with those amber eyes. Even exhausted, there was determination there. It would not give up. When they emerged from the cave, the landscape had changed again. The canyon opened up into a vast plain, covered with strange crystal formations that grew from the ground like frozen trees. The crystals were clear as glass, and reflected the alien sunlight in rainbow patterns across the ground. It was beautiful. But Haiyan-Wu felt a chill of recognition. He had seen pictures of formations like this in his mission briefings. This was the territory of the glassback serpents, creatures that could move through the crystal formations invisible to most predators. The shadow mane stopped at the edge of the crystal plain and made a sound Haiyan-Wu had never heard before. It was almost like a whimper, but deeper. The creature was afraid. "This isn't your territory, is it?" Haiyan-Wu asked. "You don't belong here." The shadow mane's ears flattened against its head. It was clearly terrified of the crystal plain, but it was also looking beyond it to something in the distance. Haiyan-Wu followed its gaze and saw a glint of metal far across the plain. His heart jumped. It was a building, human construction, the research station he had been trying to reach. "That's where we need to go," he said, "but you don't have to take me. I understand if you can't." The shadow mane looked at him for a long moment. Then it looked back at the crystal plain, then at the distant research station. It was weighing the choice between its own safety and Haiyan-Wu's life. The creature made its decision. It carefully picked up Haiyan-Wu and began walking into the crystal formation. The moment they entered the plain, Haiyan-Wu felt like they were being watched. The crystals seemed to move in his peripheral vision, but when he looked directly at them, they were still. The shadow mane's muscles were tense beneath him, ready to react to any threat. They had gone perhaps a kilometer when the first attack came. Something struck the shadow mane from the side, hitting it with enough force to stagger the massive creature. But when Haiyan-Wu looked, he saw nothing but crystals. The shadow mane roared in pain and anger. There was a gash along its flank, where something had raked it with razor-sharp claws. But the attacker was invisible. More attacks followed. The glassback serpents were living up to their name, moving through the crystal formations so perfectly camouflaged that they were impossible to see. They struck and disappeared, each attack leaving new wounds on the shadow mane. The creature kept moving, driven by desperate determination. It could not fight what it could not see, so it focused on getting to the research station as quickly as possible. But the attacks were getting more frequent, and the shadow mane was slowing down. It was then that Haiyan-Wu saw something that made his heart race. In the distance, against the research station, he could see a small aircraft. "A rescue shuttle. There," he shouted. "There's a ship." The shadow mane saw it too and found new energy. It began to run, crashing through the crystal formations with desperate speed. The glassback serpents attacked more frequently now, sensing that their prey was trying to escape. Haiyan-Wu managed to reach into his jacket pocket and pull out his last emergency flare. His hands were shaking from fever and adrenaline, but he managed to activate it. The bright red light shot up into the sky, clearly visible against the alien landscape. The effect was immediate. The rescue shuttle's engine started up, and it began moving toward them. But the flare had also attracted every glassback serpent in the area. They converged on the two travelers like a living tide. The shadow mane was bleeding from dozens of wounds now. But it kept running. It could see the rescue shuttle approaching and knew that safety was within reach. The creature's breathing was ragged, and its steps were becoming unsteady, but it refused to stop. They were still 500 meters from the shuttle when the shadow mane's strength finally gave out. The creature stumbled and fell, rolling too. protect Hyunwoo from the impact. They hit the ground hard, and the Shadowmane did not get up. "No," Hyunwoo shouted. "Don't you dare give up now." The Shadowmane tried to rise, but could not. Its legs would not support its weight anymore. Around them, the crystal formations were alive with movement as the glassback serpents closed in. The rescue shuttle was almost there, but not quite close. Enough. Hyunwoo could see the rescue team inside, could see them preparing to land. Just a few more seconds and they would be safe. The Shadowmane seemed to understand this too. With its last bit of strength, it pushed Hyunwoo away from itself, toward the approaching shuttle. It was sacrificing itself to give him those final precious seconds. "I won't leave you," Hyunwoo shouted, but his broken leg made it impossible. To move, the Shadowmane looked at him one last time. Those amber eyes were filled with something that looked remarkably like peace. It had completed its mission. It had saved him. The rescue shuttle touched down between them and the approaching glassback serpents. The rescue team poured out, weapons drawn, creating a protective perimeter. In seconds, they had Hyunwoo on a stretcher and were loading him into the shuttle. "Wait," he called out as they lifted him up. "The creature that saved me. Still out there?" But when he looked back, the Shadowmane was gone. The crystal formations were empty except for the invisible movement of the glassback serpents, retreating back into their territory. The shuttle lifted off, carrying Hyunwoo to safety. As they flew toward the research station, he pressed his face to the window and searched the crystal plane below. But he saw nothing except the glittering formations reflecting the alien sun. The rescue team was asking him questions, checking his injuries, but Hyunwoo barely heard them. All he could think about was the Shadowmane, wounded and alone somewhere in that dangerous landscape. Had the creature survived? Had it found somewhere safe to recover? Or had it given everything to save a stranger from another world? Hyunwoo closed his eyes and tried not to think about the answer. The rescue shuttle carried him toward medical care and safety. But part of him would always remain in that crystal plane, wondering about the fate of the alien creature that had become his friend. 2 weeks later, Hyunwoo sat in the medical bay of the research station, watching the alien sun set through the window. His leg was healing well thanks to the advanced medical equipment, but the wounds in his heart were taking longer to mend. The rescue team had found him alone in the crystal plane. Their report mentioned no sign of any creature that might have helped him. The official record stated that Lieutenant Hyunwoo Kim had survived alone for 4 days after his crash before being rescued. But Hyunwoo knew better. The careful tears in his jacket, where teeth had gripped without piercing. The Shadowmane fur caught on the crystal formations. The impossible distance he had traveled from his crash site. All of it told a different story. Dr. Minho Park, the station's chief xenobiologist, had listened to Hyunwoo's account with growing amazement. The older man had spent years studying the wildlife of Kithara, and everything he thought he knew about Shadowmane behavior was being challenged. "It's unprecedented," Dr. Park said, reviewing his notes. "Shadowmanes are apex predators. They don't form bonds with other species. They certainly don't sacrifice themselves for alien creatures." "But it happened," Hyunwoo insisted. "I was there. I saw it with my own eyes." Dr. Park nodded slowly. "I believe you. But it changes everything we thought we knew about intelligence and empathy in alien species." Every day since his recovery began, Hyunwoo had asked to be taken to the edge of the forest. The research station was built on the boundary between the Crystal Plains and the Shadowmane territory, and he spent hours looking into the trees, hoping to see familiar amber eyes. On the 7th day, his patience was rewarded. He was sitting in his wheelchair at the forest edge when he saw movement in the shadows. A massive shape stepped partially into view, just far enough that he could see it clearly. Ow. The Shadowmane was scarred but alive, its amber eyes watching him with the same intelligence, he remembered. "You made it," Hyunwoo whispered, tears running down his face. "You actually made it." The creature did not approach. It kept its distance, staying within the safety of its own territory. But it was there, and it was watching over him. From that day forward, Hyunwoo came to the forest edge every morning and evening. The shadow mane was always there, just visible in the shadows. They could not speak, could not touch. But the bond between them remained strong. When Hyan-Woo was cleared for light duty, he made a request that surprised everyone. Instead of accepting reassignment back to Earth, he asked to extend his tour. On Cathara, he wanted to study the relationship between humans and the intelligent species of the Moon. His request was granted, and he was assigned to work with Dr. Park on a new research project. For the first time, they would attempt to establish meaningful communication with the shadow manes. The work was slow and difficult. The creatures were naturally cautious around humans, and most of them kept their distance from the research station. But Hyan-Woo had an advantage that no other researcher possessed. He had a friend in the forest. Every day he would sit at the forest edge and talk to the shadow mane he had begun calling Nuri, after the Korean word for world. He told it about his research, about his hopes for peaceful contact between their species. And though Nuri never responded with words, its presence was a constant comfort. Slowly, other shadow manes began to appear. First one, then two, then a small group. They watched from the trees as Hyan-Woo worked with Dr. Park, setting up communication equipment and trying to establish basic contact protocols. The breakthrough came 3 months after the rescue. Hyan-Woo was sitting in his usual spot when Nuri approached closer than it ever had before. The creature stopped just at the edge of the forest and made that familiar rumbling sound. But this time, something else happened. The communication equipment they had set up registered the sound and analyzed it. The rumbling was not random noise. It had structure, patterns, meaning. It's trying to communicate, Dr. Park said in amazement. The vocalizations have linguistic structure. Over the following weeks, they made rapid progress. The shadow manes, it turned out, had a complex language of their own. They were not just intelligent animals, but a true sapient species with their own culture and society. Nuri became the first ambassador between the two species. It taught the humans basic shadow mane concepts while learning simple human words in return. The other shadow manes watched and learned, gradually becoming more comfortable with the strange aliens who had crashed into their world. 6 months after the crash, Hyan-Woo received a message from Earth. His sister Biora had sent a video letter, congratulating him on his discoveries and telling him how proud she was of his work. "I was so scared when I heard about your crash," she said in the recording. "But now I see that maybe it was meant to happen. Maybe the universe knew that you were the right person to build this bridge between worlds." That evening, Hyan-Woo shared the message with Nuri. The shadow mane listened carefully, its amber eyes reflecting the light from the communication device. "She's right, you know," Hyan-Woo said. "If I hadn't crashed, if you hadn't saved me, none of this would have happened. Our species might never have learned to communicate." Nuri made a sound that the translation software had learned to interpret as agreement. Then it made another sound, one that meant friend in the shadow mane language. Friend, Hyan-Woo repeated. First in Korean, then in the growing vocabulary of shadow mane words he had learned. "Yes, we are friends." As the alien sun set over the forest of Kithara, Hyan-Woo reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. He had come to this world as an explorer, seeking to map and catalog new territories. But he had found something much more valuable than any resource or strategic advantage. He had found proof that compassion and friendship could transcend species barriers, that intelligence and empathy were not uniquely human traits but common, threads that connected all thinking beings throughout the universe. The shadow mane that had saved his life had become the key to understanding an entire civilization. And in saving him, Nuri had saved something much larger than one human life. It had saved the possibility of peace and cooperation between two very different species. Years later, when other humans spoke of the impossible bond between a human and an alien predator, Hyan-Woo would simply smile. He knew that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered, and that sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from careful planning, but from simple acts of kindness between strangers. The forest of Kithara had taught him that courage, sacrifice, and love were not human inventions, but universal constants that existed wherever intelligent life flourished. And in that knowledge, He had found a peace that would last for the rest of his days. Nuri remained his friend and partner in the years that followed, helping to establish the first interspecies colony on Kithara. Together, they proved that the greatest adventures in the galaxy were not about conquering new worlds, but about making new friends among the stars.